On today's show, is Sam O'Reilly worth a first-round pick, and how high is his upside? We'll talk about that on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, joined by Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting and Head Scout for Dobber Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down Sam O'Reilly's game in detail. He's a center who played for the London Knights in the OHL this season, played some really good hockey. But we'll talk about kind of his overall game. We'll talk about the puck skills in the first segment, talk you through kind of his skating, his handling, his shooting, all that stuff. In the second segment, look at the more in-depth stuff, so the toolkit, the habits, the decision-making. And in our final segment, we'll talk about the upside with Sam O'Reilly, which team would be the best fit, where he ends up on draft day, and all that good stuff. But before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins, so visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started right away with Sam O'Reilly's profile, talking through the size, handedness, where he played, how many points he put up, all that good stuff.
For sure. So Sam O'Reilly is a 6'1", 176-pound right shot centerman who played for the London Knights in the OHL this past season, a fantastic OHL program where he was playing middle 6 minutes because there was so much talent up that lineup for the London Knights, whether it be Easton Cowan or Denver Barkey, a lot of guys logging big offensive minutes. But despite that, O'Reilly was still able to score 56 points, including 20 goals through 68 games. And in the playoffs, on their way to an OHL championship, he scored 5 goals and 12 points through 16 games. He was a big-time player for London, playing in that middle six, whether it be reliable defensive minutes or being a really good line connector in the offensive zone. He was able to chip in with whichever role they needed him to fulfill. And he's a type of player that could really boom big time in terms of production as a D+1 and D+2 as he gets bigger minutes at the OHL level, because he is very intelligent. He has a lot of professional level habits already in his game. And there's a level of playmaking game that he still has yet to fully explore with a lot of puck touches every single game.
Yeah, absolutely. And the big standout for me with Sam O'Reilly is how much he stepped up his game in the OHL playoffs. He showed that he's a real clutch performer. I really, really liked his OHL playoffs performances, his Memorial Cup performances. He scored some key goals at key moments with really good skill. So I think he's got sneaky upside, but we'll talk about that more in the third segment. Just to start things off here, we'll talk about the puck skills. And I think we can start off with the stick. And I think we can start off with the passing here with Sam O'Reilly because it's a big standout in his offensive toolkit. Talk me through what kind of grade you would give O'Reilly's passing and what makes it so unique.
I'd give it a 6 grade. It's a real area of strength in his offensive toolkit, and it's a very pacey type of tool. He makes very quick decisions with the puck on his stick. He doesn't hold on to possession for overly long like you see a lot of junior players, especially junior playmakers, do. Instead, he likes to have a quick pace and give and go game, likes to build play incrementally rather than go for a Hail Mary pass. You're not going to see him trying to challenge himself by making the most high skill possible passes imaginable. Rather, he makes very projectable type of plays that will work at the NHL level. And that's a big reason why his passing game is such a good grade for us. We see it being a plus level tool at the NHL level without needing to be very theoretical in that projection. We see it already in his game on the ice, whether it be quick passing plays to build up play in transition or within the offensive zone on the cycle of making smart passes and really quarterbacking play at times for his team to attack down a flank where he sees weaknesses. So there's a lot to like in his passing game, and it all flows through his quick reading of the game, quick decision-making with the puck on his stick, and level of flair that we've seen flash at times. Not particularly consistently this season, but there have been moments where the playmaking has been really bright rather than just a strategic distributor role.
For sure. And I think the main standout for me is just the lack of flash. Like, he's not a player who's going to wow you with a skill set, but every decision he makes just advances the puck in a good position. Really good at give and goes, especially, which is the best part of his playmaking, in my opinion. He's really good at being either the receiver of the pass on the give and go, so the player who kind of dictates the give and go and where the puck ends up, or as the initial distributor, so the guy who passes and then moves into space. He's good at both of those. But I like the shooting as well with Sam O'Reilly. It's not as good of a skill as his passing for sure, but for me it gets an average grade. He's a player who gets into really good positions for his shots. So his shot isn't really great in isolation in terms of pure power, pure accuracy, but he's always taking shots from in tight. He's always getting in tight for his chances. So I like the scoring ability. But what do you think of his hands? I think his hands have decent upside, but aren't really polished as they stand right now, right?
Yeah, like there's some flashes of it. I think he needs to get more extended puck touches. Like one of the drawbacks of being such a like projectable player in terms of keeping his puck touches so short and quick and pacey at the OHL level is that he hasn't been able to explore that area of his game to the same degree as like other players in this draft class who might be getting like 25 minutes a night on a first line. And he's been playing pretty consistently around like that 15-minute mark for London this season. And he's been playing that type of off puck mover, defensive specialist type of role as well, where his puck touches aren't overly extended. But I could see the handling grow into like a 5.5 type of grade tool. I think as it stands, it's closer to 4.5. Like I've seen some flashes of interesting things, but the understanding of how to leverage it to create advantages consistently isn't at the same level as it is with his passing ability, for instance.
For sure. I think the other kind of big standout with Sam O'Reilly in terms of tools is the physicality. I really like the way he handles pressured scenarios. I really like the way he plays between checks and protects the puck under pressure, which fits really well with his skill set. Like we've both mentioned so far, he's a player who keeps his puck touches short. So when he's pressured, when he's playing in tight around kind of small spaces, that's where he's at his best, because he's really good at kind of receiving a puck, moving it quickly to his backhand, and then shielding his body, putting his body between the opponent and the puck in order to keep it for just an extra second where he can get around a guy and make a backhand pass around him, that kind of thing. This physicality is really, I'd say it's more practical than kind of these big hits. He's not a Yegor Surin type of just throw his body everywhere, crush through opponents type of guy, but he's got really good practical, proactive physicality. He initiates contact. He gets ahead of plays with his body. On retrievals, he's really good at spinning off of checks. Like there's a lot of really good practical ways in which he uses his physicality that really works in the NHL. But last but not least, let's talk about the skating. I think in terms of tools, this is the one I'm least confident in it becoming kind of an NHL level tool. But talk me through why that is with Sam O'Reilly and why we don't really see his skating as being high end.
It's not a minus in his game. Like he has a lot of habits and stuff that are able to support his lack of outstanding like mobility as a skater. His stride mechanics are a little bit choppy. He's not the most efficient skater in this draft class. He pushes outwards a decent amount and loses a decent amount of energy in doing so. And he doesn't have the most fluid of edge work either. Like there's a lot of issues in his skating that just aren't like massive in magnitude, but chip away a little bit at how well he's able to move around the ice. But he compensates for that lack of physical tools and movement with a really efficient understanding of the game, and he takes very efficient routes, whether it be to lose pucks or to get into position offensively or defensively, and he's able to compensate for that lack of high-end skating ability too.
Yeah, for sure. He's one of these players like Cole Baudouin, like these kinds of guys like Liam Greentree as well, that I'm not, even though they're bad skaters, I'm not worried about it. I'm not concerned about it because they understand the game. But we'll get into that in the second segment, specifically the toolkit, the habits, and the decision-making that make Sam O'Reilly tick as an NHL projectable forward. Before I get into any of that, though, just a quick break and a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
I love sports. I love them so much that I just do not want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every single day, all summer long. So head over to fanduel.com/lockedon and make sure that you're getting the most out of your summer. Whether you want to take your swings on Major League Baseball or the Euros, which are going on in the soccer or football world, the choice is yours with FanDuel. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Alrighty, so let's move on to our second segment here where we talk about Sam Morelli's toolkit, his habits, and his decision-making in detail. Let's start off with the toolkit. Really what makes him tick is how his smarts interact with the entire rest of his game. Everything flows through processing, flows through positioning with Sam O'Reilly. His understanding and his feel for the game is so advanced, in my opinion. Like, this is a part of his game that really makes everything work together. I want to talk really about the combination of skating, of processing and passing, because I think that's where it's highlighted the most offensively. With O'Reilly, everything's about quick puck touches, but also playing them with the right pace, with the right effort, into the right areas in the offensive zone. So when he doesn't really carry the puck up the ice that much. When he gets the puck in transition, it's pass and move, pass and move, passing move. He sees defensemen on the opposite team as obstacles to get around rather than players to play through. You know what I mean? So he's a player who likes to solve problems with his passing, and that's really clear with his processing of the game. I think his processing's high end. I think it's my favorite part of his game. He understands the game at a high speed, even though his skating doesn't carry him at that top speed. His brain goes way faster than his feet, and that helps him, play pucks in the right areas, play give and goes, the stuff that we talked about with his passing in the first segment. But how else does his processing help his game? I'm thinking defensively, physically. Let's focus on the defense first. Like, what's the part of his game there in terms of processing that you like the most?
I really do feel that strategy is the name of the game with O'Reilly. Everything that he does has a specific purpose, and it's a result of something that he read on the ice. So in the defensive zone, that could be clogging up the most dangerous passing lane and spotting that very intuitively, or shepherding play towards the boards or into an area where he has more support, where he can allow his team to just like suffocate out a chance. Everything he does is purposeful. He's not blindly chasing the puck or pressuring opponents or trying to fulfill a certain role that he thinks he needs to do in that situation. It's all based off of his positioning, the positioning of the puck, of opposition, and his teammates. And he plays into a defensive system incredibly well. He has a deep understanding of what he has to do in different situations and how he's able to influence play, whether he has the puck on a stick or not, whether he's playing defensive hockey or offensive hockey. His understanding of how he can impact the play is really refined. And it's one of the reasons that he could be such a big boom type of player in his D+1 season when he's playing more minutes in a London system and has more of an offensive role. That strategic mind and understanding of how to break down structures and understand how he can best impact the play, what could carry him really, really far.
For sure. It's really like you said, I think strategy is really the right word. Like, the way he approaches the game is always, it's chess. It's all chess, the way he approaches the game. He knows that sometimes it's even as complex as, I know I'm going to clog this lane up, so the opponent's going to have to go there. So I'm going to, after closing this lane, I'm going to zoom to that side of his body in order to block the next option. That's another part of his game I really like, the way he approaches puck battles. So on retrievals, because he's slow, he usually gets to the puck second in the offensive zone. What ends up happening is he'll kind of stick tap the opponent on one side of him, make him think that he's pressuring that side, and then the moment the moment the defenseman commits to the other side, he's already there. Like, he stick taps on one side, zooms the other way, intercepts a puck on the other side of him. There's just so much translatability to the defensive game, the forechecking, the effort level, the intensity, the awareness, and again, the chess in Sam Morelli's game is really advanced. On top of that, I think in terms of positioning, we already talked about that in the defensive zone. I want to talk about it in the offensive zone specifically because, oh my goodness, is this kid always in the right spots? It's ridiculous. Like, he has this sixth sense for where space is, where the puck's going to end up, and he's always in the right spots. And I think that's a part of his game offensively. It's really going to make the rest of his game tick. Because it's one thing to be a good kind of pass and move type of player. It's another to be able to land in the right spots in order to make that pass and move game work really well. And that, for me, that's what makes him a first rounder. We'll talk about that more in detail in the third segment, but really, I mean, the ability to pass and move, to get up the ice is great, but really the positioning offensively is just, I mean, there's so much to love there, right?
Absolutely. There's a bunch to like in his offensive off puck movement, and I think that's one of the things that's also going to support his play at the NHL level so well. No matter
Yeah.
where he ends up, whether it be a third line or a fourth line role, at the end of the day, maybe even a complimentary second liner if he really starts hitting on his upside, he's going to be able to support play incredibly well because he reads it so well. He knows how to facilitate play for his line mates. He knows what they need or want him to do, and he does that. And he does it very consistently and very predictably if you're playing on his team. And he's such a pain to play against too because he finds those pockets of soft ice with such ease. He's able to ride defenders' blind spots. He makes their heads have to be on a swivel because he can find that soft ice like few other like quote unquote defensive players for among forwards in this draft class. And that's another thing that I think supports that offensive upside a lot because that's something that will work at the NHL level in terms of finding soft ice consistently and being able to create quickly and with a bunch of pace and intensity when he does get the puck in those dangerous areas and he only has a beat of a second to work with.
Absolutely, and I think that's where he's at his best is when he does have the only that second to work with. Because I feel like when he has open ice, he still relies on those quick processing tools to move pucks up the ice. So there are times where he makes a one-touch play, he makes a one-touch pass, or takes a shot when he's actually got some space to work with. And I think that's the part of his game that as soon as he figures that part out, like, oh my goodness, the offense will come in the OHL for sure. Once he gets to the NHL and the space kind of tightens up again, he'll have to readjust. But so far, the way he plays in the OHL is really reliant on one-touch plays, 1-2s, give and goes, one-timers from the low slot, that kind of stuff. But as soon as he figures out that he has space to work with, he's going to be very, very dangerous in the OHL. I do also want to talk about the habits overall because this is a prospect who not just on the ice but off the ice shows really, really good habits. He's a leader in the locker room already, even though he's playing a kind of middle six role for the London Knights and played that role throughout the entire season. Like, he was a guy who was talking in the locker room, who was giving his team pep talks. On the ice, you can see him communicate with his teammates. He kind of points them to where he wants them to go or which players he wants them to cover when he's back checking. He both listens and dictates on the ice when he's kind of back checking and helping his defensemen. So there's a bunch of habits that go beyond just kind of the on puck habits that I really, really like with Sam O'Reilly. And I especially like the forechecking habits. He's not a player who commits too hard on either side of the player. He stays reactive and doesn't really kind of rush into forechecking scenarios. Like, he's not the type of player who is going to throw his whole body into a check on the forecheck. He's very much a sit back, let play develop, figure out what the next play is type of forward. And I absolutely love that part of his game. And in terms of decision making, like, there's no real fault in O'Reilly's decision making, right?
Not really. He makes consistent, intelligent decisions. And I think part of the reason that it's been so consistent this season is because he's very content in just making the simple, effective play, not doubling down on only making simple plays. Certainly, he's able to make some high-end playmaking plays, and he's able to fall back behind coverage and create something when he gets that puck in a pocket of space in the offensive zone. But so much of his game is dictated on just making smart, quick, intelligent plays, and that's something that will work at the NHL level. And there's so much to like, whether it be in his quick reads of defensive situations and just intuitively knowing as well where he needs to be to have the biggest impact, or whether it be on puck and just making a give and go play to get around an opponent rather than reaching into his bag of tricks and trying to dangle his way around them. Everything he does is refined and polished, and that's something that in a draft eligible who might be available on day 2 of the draft is something that NHL teams should find extremely enticing.
For sure. I always say with prospects, there's a spectrum between poise and aggression, and O'Reilly's very much on the poise side of that. I don't see as much aggression in his game. Even on forechecks, even when he's forechecking hard, he's not forechecking with aggression. He's forechecking with hard poise. I don't know how else to describe
And strategy.
it. Yeah, so he's kind of the opposite of Carter Yakimchuk in that sense, like the anti Carter Yakimchuk, if you will.
He really is.
And I fear that that's why I like his game. Like that's the exact problem I have with Hack'em Check. But regardless, we'll move on to our third segment where we talk about the best fit for Cardi Hack'em Check, the best fit for Sam O'Reilly at the NHL level, what his upside is, what the likely projection for him is in the NHL, and where he ends up on draft day, and whether or not he's worth a first round pick. We'll get into all that in just a sec, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, so let's close things off here in our final segment with the breakdown of where Sam O'Reilly ends up on draft day, what his upside is, what his projection is, and which team would be the best fit for him in the NHL. Let's start with the upside. What realistically, I mean, we alluded to it a tiny bit. You talked about potentially being a complementary player on the second line. How likely is that outcome? Like, I don't really see it as that likely, but I think there's still a possibility, a small chance that O'Reilly kind of develops into that. What do you think?
I'd give it 10 to 15%. I think it's relatively small as a likelihood, but there really is like pop potential with him. Like he could boom next season. I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever. And he has that strong foundation of habits and tools that we've been talking about all episode long here that could really support him if he's able to experiment more with keeping the puck on his stick for longer. And as you mentioned in the last segment, he always does make that pacey, like quick one-touch play to keep play moving along. If he's able to integrate that ability to hold on to pucks when he has space and time, to add some more diversity into his on-puck game rather than just being that quick give and go, keep the puck moving, keep my feet moving type of player, and hold on to it and kind of slow down the pace of play a bit more often and hold on to the puck in space and try to explore his handling and his playmaking ability when he does have that space to work with. That's when I can see that second line upside being a little bit more interesting and more likely in his game. But even in that situation, he would need complementary players to elevate him in that type of situation. It would have to be dynamic players who really command having the puck on their stick, but rely on a player to create some space and time for them on the ice, which is what O'Reilly does best offensively too. And he's able to give that defensive support. I could see that happening. I could see that upside being there, but there's a reason that he's not been a slam dunk first round talent on either of our draft boards this season, because that likelihood is still very theoretical and a lot would have to go in the right direction. That said, the third line upside is awesome, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that it's really, really certain even. I think that O'Reilly's chances of being an NHLer are up there with the best in this draft. Like his odds are really, really good because of how intelligent he is, because of how supportive he is. And to kind of piggyback off the upside thing, like he's a type of player, like I think his best hockey was played when he was playing with the likes of Easton Cowan and Ruslan Gazizov and Denver Barkey. When he was playing with those guys, I think O'Reilly was really at his best. And that's a sign of a player who would be a really good complementary player and is also a facilitator, because he not only made himself look better with those players, he made his teammates look better, he made his line mates look better. And I think Easton Cowan played his best hockey when he was paired with O'Reilly and Barkey, for example. So for me, with O'Reilly, what makes him so interesting is that not only is he a player that's going to make the NHL because of his defensive reliability, because of his hockey sense, his processing, his positioning, he's also a player who's going to make his teammates look better. I think he can elevate a line. He can turn a 2C line, so a kind of third line that's kind of on par with the second line. I think he can take that line and make it a second line, if that makes sense, because of the ability to uplift players. But I think at the end of the day, like I'd give it an 85% chance that O'Reilly makes the NHL. I think he's got really, really good odds, even as a kind of bottom line, kind of real facilitator, penalty killer, face-off taker. Like his face-offs were really good this year. He's played center, he's played wing. I've seen him more as a center because of his style of play. But yeah, there's a lot to like here. And in terms of certainty, he's up there with the best in this draft. But let's talk about where he ends up on draft day, because these types of players usually get picked up by a contender, right? Like I'm thinking Linus Eriksson, him. I'm thinking of Owen Beck a couple years ago to Montreal. He got selected at quite literally the last pick of the first pick of the second round, at 33rd overall. I would see this be the kind of likely outcome for Sam O'Reilly, because Sam O'Reilly, for me, in a lot of ways, reminds me of a slower Owen Beck, a slower, maybe even better processing Owen Beck. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think he ends up as kind of one of the first picks of the second round to a bottom of the NHL team that's looking for certainty, or do you see him really as a first rounder to a contender?
I see like the 28 to 35 range being the most likely for Sam O'Reilly. So either one of the final picks in that first, whether it be like the Dallas Stars, for instance, I think could be quite interested. Even the Calgary Flames, if they want to, if they're going to pick a defenseman with their first pick in the first round, I could see them really like a guy like O'Reilly with that second pick. They're obviously not a contending team at the moment, but they like players up this alley who are refined and intelligent and support play and elevate players around them. So there's a bunch of options here, and a lot of those contending teams I think could be really big fans of O'Reilly. But even once you get into that upper end of the second round, like you have the Winnipeg Jets at 37th overall, with rumblings of Rutger McGroarty possibly being on the move and not wanting to sign in Winnipeg. I could see Winnipeg wanting to explore the avenue of a guy like Sam O'Reilly if he's still on the board. There's a guy who is also highly intelligent, is also a good leader, is also a real supporter of play while having specific skills. While McGroarty is a really good like one-touch scorer in the offensive zone, O'Reilly's a really good one-touch playmaker in the offensive zone. He plays with that pace and is so projectable to the NHL style. So if they rather than move McGroarty for a draft pick, want to package him up in a type of deal for something else and want to use an existing draft selection that they have access to at 37th on a potential replacement up that alley, I think O'Reilly makes a bunch of sense.
For sure. I think O'Reilly's best fit for me, though, is the Anaheim Ducks. They've shored up on top 6 talent throughout the last few drafts. They've got Mason McTavish and Troy Terry and Trevor Zegras and in the pipeline and kind of working their way up, Leo Carlson. They've got a bunch of pieces there and that are true top 6 future forwards. What they're really looking for and what I think they're going to look to add with their second pick of the first round there at 31st is a bottom 6 projection player who uplifts his teammates, can play on the penalty kill, and is a right shot player because pretty much all of their forwards are left shots so far. That's exactly Sam O'Reilly. I think that's the player that would make the most sense going to Anaheim there. He's not their usual pick, but again, they got in the situation where they're chock full of top 6 players and don't have much support because of their usual standards in terms of selecting prospects. So I think he'd be a fantastic fit there in Anaheim and would make a lot of sense given what they've built so far.
And they're picking at 35
in terms of outcomes,
well. So they have 2 swings at him in that range.
Absolutely. And I think those are 2 great options for them. 2 great spots for him to end up. I think if you let him slip to 35, you're taking a risk because I think that Sam O'Reilly could very well be picked up between 32 and 34. Like there's a couple teams that will take a long look at him and think, this could be the type of player we need moving forward. He's really a supportive player. He's a player who really uplifts the players that he plays with. So I think a lot of teams are going to look at that, see his performances in the OHL playoffs and see a clutch, defensively responsible, excellent positioning, great playmaking center who can do a bit of everything for your team. So I personally would try to pick him up with one of the first picks of the last picks of the first round, because I'm pretty sure one of the 3 or 4 teams between 31 and 35 would be very, very happy to add him. Last but not least, let's just talk about the best fit. So not necessarily the team that's going to pick him up, but which team, if we're talking. If we don't look at draft position at all, if we just look at teams and what they look for, what they need. I've already talked about the Anaheim Ducks as a great fit and a potential team that could pick him up. Which other teams do you see needing a player like Sam O'Reilly moving forward?
I think the Colorado Avalanche could be really interested. Like they already have a player, perhaps a little bit better in the same mold in their pool in Callum Ritchie, but this is a perennial contender. They're going to want to move some prospects for NHL talent, and doubling down on projectable, high motor, intelligent 2-way centers is certainly a good strategy and a great trade chip to have in your back pocket on top of a potential depth contributor down the line. So I think Colorado would also do great work with O'Reilly's development, and they're picking at 24th. That's the higher range where he could end up going. But if he ends up falling into the second, like there's so many teams that I think could really, really appreciate what he brings to the table. Like the Seattle Kraken, for instance, at 40th overall, or if they want to move up, for instance, I think O'Reilly would be a fantastic fit there as well. Like Seattle loves playing a quick pace, give and go style of hockey, and O'Reilly thrives in that environment.
Absolutely. I think that would be a great fit. Seattle's got I mean, they've got Shane Wright and Matty Beniers ready to go in their top 6 potentially for the next, couple of years. They could kind of shore up that center line with Sam O'Reilly as well. Like, that's an amazing fit. I think that would be really, really good for their game. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment down below letting us know what you think of the episode, what you want us to talk about next, and who you think your team should, and whether or not you think your team should pick up Sam O'Reilly. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports on YouTube's first 24/7 sports channel. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of June. This has been Hattie Kalakash, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, with Sebastian Hyde, Director of European Scouting for Dobber Prospects, and we hope you tune in next time.